Our correspondent Lewis Vaughan-Jones is in Birmingham, where there has also been violence tonight. What's happening there now, Lewis?
The police at the moment are trying to contain and control groups of people, concentrating mainly on the city centre, the Bullring, the shopping part of Birmingham. Earlier on, groups would run towards a shop, attack it, smash their way in and seem to be taking whatever they could. When I was there earlier on, we watched people walk away with clothes under their jackets and electronic equipment that was strewn around the streets. They would be taking that away as well. About 100 or a few hundred or so in total. Police say they've made 9 arrests and they've been telling people to stay away from the city centre, and roads in and out of here have been closed.
Lewis Vaughan-Jones in Birmingham, thank you.
Well, such is the crisis. The Prime Minister is cutting short his holiday in Italy and will return to London overnight. Our political correspondent Lucy Manning is in Westminster. Lucy.
Well, the Prime Minister is getting a military flight at 3 a.m. this morning back from Italy. He'll arrive here in the early hours. He will chair the emergency Cobra meeting, meet with the Home Secretary and the acting Met Police Chief. I think he had no choice but to come back. 3 nights of rioting, the streets out of control, people asking who exactly is in control. And with his Home Secretary Theresa May cutting short her holiday today, the Mayor Boris Johnson announcing that he would return tomorrow. I think it would have been inexplicable for the Prime Minister to have stayed away even longer. There has been some criticism he hadn't come back sooner, and Ed Miliband, the Labour leader, will also return tomorrow. I'm told the Prime Minister's decision was a late one. He saw the pictures this evening, realised it was getting worse and made that decision to come back. There is now pressure from MPs for Parliament to be recalled.
Lucy, thank you very much. Right, all the rest of the day's news still to come, and we'll take a look at tomorrow's front pages. Plus, on the front line on the streets of Mogadishu, the fight to bring aid to those facing famine in the Somali capital.
And tributes for a Second World War heroine. The woman who inspired the film Charlotte Gray dies aged 98. Hundreds of billions of pounds were wiped off stock markets across the world again today. In New York, the Dow Jones suffered its worst day for 2.5 years after the country's credit rating was cut. It's heightened fears of another recession. Markets here and elsewhere in Europe also slumped. In a moment, the latest live from our correspondents in New York and Brussels. First, Chris Shipp reports on the plunge on Wall Street.
It was another hot day on Wall Street as once again the Dow Jones plummeted deep into the red. It was for traders and investors the first day to react to Friday's historic decision to strip the United States of its AAA credit rating. By the time the stock exchange closed, the Dow had plummeted more than 630 points. Why? Because unlike Britain, unlike France, the US is no longer in the elite group of countries considered to be a risk-free borrower.
We're selling ARIA.
On this trading floor uptown, the most widely followed index of American stocks did not look pretty. And here they know who to blame for the country's downgrade.
If you try and take the correlation from how the U.S. runs its debt versus a household, how it runs its debt, you've got to get your credit cards down, you've got to get your payments down. And I think, it may sound a bit too simplistic, but those folks in Washington really have heard a resounding, get your house in order, so to speak.
In Washington, President Obama was responding to criticisms from the agency which downgraded his nation that the country's political paralysis was in large measure at fault.
Because after witnessing a month of wrangling over raising the debt ceiling, they doubted our political system's ability to act. But this is the United States of America. No matter what some agency may say, we've always been and always will be a AAA country.
But if he heard the appeals for a truce, this Republican nominee for president did not appear to be listening.
The failure of the president to reignite this economy and to get people back to work is one of the reasons we're seeing such high levels of deficit and why the debt continues to grow at an alarming rate. We need to put more Americans back to work.
But there can be no doubt about what the markets made of the downgrade. They're listening to the warnings that without further action on American debt, the country might be downgraded again.
So, Chris, another bad day. Are there real fears of America slipping into a double-dip recession?
Well, Mark, I think the figures speak for themselves. The 630-point drop today was worse than last Thursday. It was the worst since the credit crunch in 2008. And in terms of points lost, it was the 6th worst day in the history of this entire stock exchange. I think what it shows is that having your national credit downgraded, like America's was last Friday, is not meaningless. There are genuine fears here about the effect it will have on consumer confidence in an economy that requires consumers to keep spending money to stop this economy going back into a recession. So a lot of fears here, and I think that's what the market was simply reacting to today. Earlier we were wondering whether they were simply trying to work out whether the American economy was stepped on a sort of soft patch, if you like, or actually jumped into quicksand. I think what is clear is that they're hoping for the former, but they certainly fear the latter.
All right, Chris, thank you very much indeed.
Well, here the FTSE fell more than 100 points for a 4th session in a row, the first time in its history. There were similar drops in markets in Germany and France. Not even the European Central Bank buying government bonds in debt-laden Italy and Spain could stop it. Our Europe correspondent Martin Geisler on the ongoing crisis in the Eurozone.
The headlines are familiar. The slide continues. The news across Europe wasn't good tonight. It rarely is these days, but it wasn't as bad as it might have been. When the markets opened this morning, traders braced themselves. The nightmare many had predicted didn't materialise. Not immediately, at least. Shares rallied early on, buoyed by the European Central Bank's decision to buy up Spanish and Italian bonds. That makes it easier and cheaper for those countries to borrow money. But it was just a multi-million euro sticking plaster, and it only held the wound for a couple of hours. By lunchtime, the markets were quivering again. Share prices were falling. Analysts were not surprised.
The easiest solution for politics is still to have bigger rescue packages. But it's no sustainable solution. We need a solution which targets the economic perspectives, and I see nothing in this regard.
In London, the FTSE fell more than 178 points. The 4th straight day it suffered a triple-digit loss. It's never had a run like that before. Today's drop, almost 3.5%, wiped nearly £50 billion off the value of Britain's biggest companies. And the pain was shared right across Europe. In France, the CAC 40 lost almost 5% of its value, and in Germany, the DAX index fell by a similar amount. There was a significant drop on the Spanish exchange, and in Greece, shares hit their lowest level for 14 years after a 6% slump in prices. There's a growing acceptance now that drastic action could be Europe's only way out of this in the long term.
I mean, there are only 2 scenarios possible, let's say, or we take a decisive step towards more integrated economic policy making, let's say towards a single, take finance minister, or we go backwards.
A United States of Europe or the breakup of the single currency. Desperate measures, but these are desperate times. So another dismal day for the European markets. The most optimistic analysis I heard today was from economists who said, look, it's August, people are on holiday, there's not much liquidity in the markets, governments have their eyes off the ball. This could be just a blip. Things could get back to the way they were a couple of weeks ago before much longer, but it won't be easy. Europe dodged a bullet today, let there be no doubt about that, and it didn't miss by much. This might not have been Black Monday, but it was hard, and Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday and Friday don't look easy either.
OK, Martin Geisler, thank you.
The starving people of Somalia have at last been given some hope tonight. Rebel forces have withdrawn from parts of the capital, Mogadishu, allowing much-needed aid to get through. But as our senior correspondent James Mates reports, there's concern that the authorities still won't be able to cope with the sheer numbers of people needing help.
It's been a long time since there was any good news out of Somalia, but government and other African forces here do seem to have won a clear victory as the Islamic insurgents Al-Shabaab have been driven from the capital. Over the weekend, as the rebels melted away, these Ugandan troops were able simply to drive into positions that they'd fought for months to capture.